My name's Flynn. I'm a game developer. My studio is Geek Games. I worked with Blue Studio on Android iOS release, which was Haberdashery. That came out last year. My current main project is Welcome to Undercog. This is a lot more long-term development. My background is illustration and tattoo art, which translated to games in a very pen and ink style. This year I've shown at a lot of conventions, and that's actually what I'm here to talk to you guys about today. Convention crafting and booth crafting is an art form of its own that ties into your other skills as a developer. It's something almost as critical as your development, because a game that no one plays is a game that doesn't really have the effect that you ultimately desired. A little bit of cursory introduction, but beyond that we can just sort of go into what makes a good booth and what has the largest effect on the audience that you're trying to affect. That's enough cursory introduction, and I am not a huge fan of PowerPoint. I'm a game developer first and foremost, and this entire thing, we're going to drive around this adorable little tank out of appropriated Unity assets. This is from one of their demos. I did not make it. It is just something I appropriated. Textures in mine though, so that's cool. But, this is sort of just a segue. This is something that sets tone, which is why some of you are asking this. What does this have to do with booth crafting? What does this have to do with making a presence? It is entirely for a purpose. This is presentation. It establishes who I am in the room right now. This is a deliberate measure, because ultimately, oh, it's so much harder than not looking at it. Also, again, physics drift. All right. This was made very, very rapidly and with very little forethought. All right, so ultimate goal of boothing, we're trying to create awareness for our game. We're trying to show the current state of our game, pre-release, release, or green light, and then ultimately you're trying to get feedback for your game while you're at a convention. Of course, there are things that we have to do to establish this. This means people have to play your game and most of all get to know you. I use this gimmick so you guys can get to know me. I'm going to have a tone of irreverence. I'm going to do things as non-conventionally as possible. You guys are going to watch physics errors and things like that happen, because I'd rather do this than sit up here and be static. Ultimately, yeah, my camera's drifting, that's a problem. Ultimately, I'm walking away from my slides, that's a problem. But you're getting a better sense of who I am. You're getting a better sense of where my priorities are. If I wanted to do static slides, that would have been extremely easy, and it would have been a lot less work, but it wouldn't have conveyed the message that ultimately I want to get out there to this crowd. Already, we're relating at a better level. We're also sort of in the environment of the game. We're believing where we are. This is the ultimate struggle. This is what we're all trying to do. We're all trying to get people's attention. We're trying to draw attention to our game using shameless internet cats, whatever we can. This is a cheap shot. This is deliberately a cheap shot because it works. In conventions, in the world that we're in now, there are more indies than ever. The tools have become much more accessible. We have conventions that are growing in scale every year. MagFest grew, I think, 25% this year. There was a lot of devs. You're going to be not in a competitive environment, but you're going to be in a memory environment. Being able to keep people interested in what you've done and create a lasting impression and get them to have the follow through is all based on the initial impact that you can create at a convention. The first method that I personally employ to do this is color. This is my booth. I believe this is the Too Many Games one, and this is the charming crew that helped me out at my first MagFest showing. The color that was used in this environment was not an accident. It is for a very specific purpose. That is the 100-yard gaze. 100 yards away, you can still see this booth. This booth still makes a presence. The group of people that was helping me, you can see bottom right, we're all wearing these sort of aqua-ish hoodies. The reason for that is instant recognition of anyone associated with my game. The idea there is they know they can talk to you. They know that there's a presence in the convention environment that creates an identity. This year, I went back to MagFest. I was walking around just wearing this hoodie. Admittedly, I was doing legitimately nothing productive. But someone came up to me and said, "Hey, you were here last year. I was like, oh, really? And he was like, yeah, I recognize the hoodie. This is where we stay away from non-primary and non-elementary colors in our booth design. The really obnoxious green shag rug, the little pink lamp, from a distance, they're going to remember that. And the recognition is high. It's very easy to get things that are black and white for your booth design. It's very easy to get things that are red for your booth design. Stay away from all of that. The ultimate goal is to create as much surface area as you can that's a distinct color palette and really describes the environment you're trying to create. The colors that are in my booth, the purple, the green, those are to create a tie-in to who I am as a person and who I am as a developer. They're loud, they're obnoxious, and they're irreverent, and that's sort of my pace. Everyone is going to have a different one. If you have a cooler color environment, if you're a little bit more fluid, a little bit more sedate in like how you'd like to present yourself, you're going to need to cover a lot more surface area because cool colors tend to blend into their environment, and it's going to be much, much harder for people to identify that as a distinct space. Also, light is a serious consideration. Conventions do not always have consistent lighting. You will be under horribly bleaching convention lighting, those big nasty fluorescents overhead, and they will drown out your really neutral palette. Beyond that, you will also have conventions that choose to use a dimmer lighting. They want a more arcade setting, they want a more intimate setting, they want a setting that recreates something that they associate with games. Bring light. Bring your own light sources, and if you can, put photo filters over them or any sort of gel lens, and you can actually just create a huge, huge splotch of color on any wall or backdrop you have that really helps set your environment. This is sort of like the segue on color. Beyond color, your game was created, you have tons of assets. Your personality is conveyed through the assets and the method they were created, and the inspiration for what we did and your methodology for doing it. Undercog, I do actually all traditional pen and ink. I do it by hand, so I have a lot of really nice on-paper assets that are very easy to show. I bring those with me in a portfolio to show people. Many, if not most people, are doing creation in some sort of digital medium. You're going to have sprite art, you're going to have 3D models. Take screenshots as often as you can and bring them around on the tablet. People travel in groups to conventions, and if you're being single player, there are going to be people lingering back. This will give you an opportunity to talk to the people and really engage them in terms of what you've created, how much you've put into it, and they get a much more full, much more relatable picture of your game design. We have spent countless hours at our computers, we've spent countless hours at our drawing boards, and you really want that message to come through. They'll identify with your game, they'll identify with what you do a lot better. This is just my method. Like, I bring absolutely everything on paper that I can, and it's a really nice aside. Also, even if your game is multiplayer, consistently at conventions, things come in waves. So you'll have people stacked in line waiting to play your game. Having those source materials, having where you came from, even just your really, really rough sketches on paper of how you want to design a mechanic or a level design is a talking point. It's that much more involvement with your game, and having those on hand prevents someone from waiting in line who might just walk away. It gives them an opportunity to change their mind. It gives them an opportunity to say, hey, this is something someone really cares about. This is something that someone has really put a lot into, and I really can't wait to engage what they have. Beyond that, gamers come in all shapes and sizes. Make your booth versatile. The stock booth is a table, and that's pretty much it. You have a standard table, maybe 2 chairs. My game plays on keyboard and mouse, as well as on a controller. Different people have very strong preferences, one way or the other, and also, this booth is designed so that anything can be taken out of the way very, very quickly. My chairs are foldable, and the tables actually move vertically. This has come into play with people with different builds who want a different level of comfort while they're sitting and playing. And also there is the issue of not everyone walks up to your booth. There are people in wheelchairs, there are people with walkers. And setting up a scalable booth, something that moves vertically, really accommodates people of all different statures and all different physical condition. Beyond that, the table serves a purpose. At conventions, people acquire stuff. They are handed swag. They're handed, posters. They purchase items, some of which might be large. channel between your two stations where people can easily set items, feel comfortable that their items aren't going to be trampled or kicked out of the way, and they'll be willing to commit to your game longer. You might get more replays, which will ultimately lead to A, better connection, B, better feedback. People will discuss your game, they'll evolve your game more the longer they stay. More than one play is really amazing because there's always a learning curve. Many of these people are going to be sitting down, playing your game, and this will be the first impression they get. If they go back for that second impression, you'll get a more honest representation of what they do when they play the game, how they play the game, and how someone's going to engage your game in. Conventions also, there are lines. There will be very, very, very long lines. For the people in line, they are bored, they are anxious, and they are waiting for input. They all came here to sort of draw on the convention. They want input at all times. Get to your booth extremely early. Set up as early as you can, and bring your cheapest, absolutely cheapest media that you have to hand out and comb the line. Bring your source materials and talk to people while they're outside. They'll be queued up for who knows how long trying to get into this convention. If you go out there and you show them screenshots of your games, footage of your game on a tablet, bring it around, you can give them promotional cards, say where you are, what you'll be showing, give them a marker to find you, like, hey, I have 2 really tall 8-foot banners at either end of my booth. Look for those and come play my game. While they're standing in line, you'll actually have a much better connection than when you're in the convention because you won't have the distraction of everything that's around them because you are competing with every panel, every vendor, and every game there in order to get just a little bit of attention. So you might have moments, whereas in the line, you have almost a captive audience. I've sort of toyed with the idea, although I'm not sure. I would really like indies to sort of really embrace making that connection and maybe get water bottles and slap your promotional card around them. Promotional cards, really great cheap way to get like that small engagement. Whereas if you're giving out buttons or some other tangible good that's much more solid, your overhead is considerably higher and it's not guaranteeing you any better engagement. Buttons are really cool. I get them for a lot of conventions, but I prefer to give them to people that actually come to the booth and engage because it's just one more step of connection. Whereas someone who might only have a glancing view of your game is probably only deserving of the card that's only going to cost you a couple cents, whereas you're at 50 cents, 75 cents, depending on what type of tangible good you decide to give them. But definitely come the lines. I've made some of my best connections there. I've met some of the best supporters of my games in the line before the convention ever opened. All right, moving right along. The next thing is press. Press is how you get legs from your convention experience. The convention experience lasts whatever the duration of it is. You have X amount of exposure to people. You'll only really get to interact with them in that time span, and the retention is what it is. They've taken in a lot of input during that time span, and they don't necessarily hold on to all of it. So the press is where you get legs. They have production time, which means the turnover for when they get your video or podcast or article out might be a week, it might be 2 weeks, which is great. It's actually a little bit better because you've invested all of this capital and all this time and energy into building your convention experience, but it's over when it's over. Press will carry you through that. You want to feed them the best possible you can. Google Drive is great for this. Dropbox you can use previously, but the Google Drive setup where they can sort of preview things and see what assets you're offering them is much better. Give them your logos with a blank background, put it on the PNG, something that really easily goes into After Effects or something like that. Sound clips from your game, anything that you have can be a snippet, and then compartmentalize it into folders. Having in the folder struct lets people who are in a different medium grab only what they need. Have a zip file for the entire folder inside the folder so that they can grab it all in one chunk. This lets them get assets that are very valuable to them because many of these guys, this is not a full-time profession. They don't have the time to dedicate to it. And if you have the assets that they want ready to go, they're much more likely to spend time covering you. That being said, you don't always get covered. There is not always press that carries, but even if their viewership isn't great, even if it's a smaller podcast or something like that, it is something to pull sound bites from and reuse later. Pull sound bites, pull quotes, start keeping a master list of everything that you have, because when you go to something like crowdfunding or you go to something like presenting at a very strongly curated showcase, they're going to want to know about that. They're going to want to know about people that have talked about you and people that have been excited about you. This is one of those return on investment things that isn't a financial gain, but it is a strong gain. These people are content creators. Everyone who is a media outlet is creating content. They're just doing it different from you. They're creating something that has monetary value, isn't to be purchased. They're creating digestible content. Use it as much as you can and develop those relationships. Those relationships really start with you making it easy on them. This sort of gets to the return on investment thing of conventions. Return on investment is difficult. The return on investment frequently is not financial, especially middle to small size conventions. If you are counting on your game being in release already and seeing a huge financial bump from a convention, unfortunately there's an intrinsic flaw. You won't necessarily see a gain there. In terms of your sales, same thing applies unfortunately to crowdfunding. You won't see a significant gain there. I've talked to a lot of devs who've been in various stages when they've gone into conventions sort of expecting a bump, and they're always very disappointed. That's why stack your convention schedule way in front of any of those objectives. You want to have the media, you want to have what they said about you, things to make your crowdfunding more rich or to make your greenlight page more rich. It's not necessarily going to create for you a bump that you'll be able to measure, but it will be able to give you the content that can fuel that later. And yeah, it's sort of like a major download to say that return on investment financially is going to be low, but ultimately, if you adjust your schedule and you pull your heavy convention schedule long before any of your important dates for viewership or donation or for purchase, you'll be able to stack the deck and you'll have a lot more assets and be able to present yourself much better. The basic advice there is as early as possible, get your conventions going. That also ties into feedback. Your conventions are going to be your best feedback. People sort of go into it saying, well, people will be nicer at conventions and sort of give you the courtesy. People are plenty honest. It is great. They do a really good job of telling you things. But it ties into a very important piece of advice I actually got from several people, most notably Trumpster Hartley. If they tell you something's wrong with your game, they are 100% correct. If they tell you how to fix it, they're almost certainly wrong. Yeah, no one knows your game like you. Take feedback and filter it through yourself. I actually had a thing where people very much said in undercog that we needed to speed up the attack animations. Naturally, I took that advice, put a bunch of effects on it, put a bunch of particles on it, and slowed it down. People said it was much better. I did day-to-day iteration through the convention, which is also something you can do. Keep your stable build. You will break it at least once. But yeah, but their advice was right. It felt slow. So they had me speed it up. But the effects hide it. They just needed more on-screen action. So take your feedback with a grain of salt. You are your own best filter. All right, moving along. Here is the problem. Conventions. We don't have infinite money. If any of you do, I'll be accepting your donations later for my development. That would be super awesome. And it wouldn't matter to you because you have infinite money. And there are ways to mitigate this. I actually, on my website, outline a lot of this. Groupon is actually a good resource for developers, believe it or not, because it will ultimately get you physical goods. Groupon frequently will run coupons for Vistaprint. I actually stockpile them throughout the year, and then I'll use them to order printable materials, banners, promotional items, things like that. Frequently, there is something akin of about 50% off, and then it will run parallel with anything Vistaprint has going. Mind you, ultimately, like in terms of clear conscience, I would like to use smaller printers, I would like to use local people, I would like to use people that are involved in the game scene, but the almighty bottom dollar happens. So sign up for the Pure Buttons mailing list, anywhere from 15 to 30% off like every week, and order your tangible giveaways. long before you're going to be at a convention. Just keep them in a drawer until you know you're going to be showing. Amazon cables. Amazon basics are amazing. They're reasonable quality and they're ultra cheap. And then top left, we have the final end-all solution. DIY is great. The hoodies that I'm wearing right now and the hoodies that were shown in the presentation earlier were done with wax paper, an X-Acto knife, and a sponge. Just that and some paint from Walmart. Bringing the cost of these hoodies that actually have successfully gained me recognition, successfully gotten repeat fanship, these were about $8, which is really, really awesome. I've gotten more than my mileage out of them. On my website, I actually do a much longer, much more in-depth outline of how you can do all of this stuff. Like step-by-step for how to do the fake screen printing, a few more resources for outlining where you can save money and where it's a good idea to save money. So that'll be accessible at any given time. Also, after this presentation, all of this will be up on my website. It will be much more in depth. There are also other resources. Able Gamer is a really, really great resource for learning about accessibility, learning about what works in terms of creating a booth that is more accessible to people, especially people with disabilities. But almost anything that applies to an individual with disabilities applies to mass appeal. Also, I will have link outs to a couple of people that have done really, really in-depth things that would be not worth going over in this scenario, but setting up your booth to run itself, making sure that you don't have user error that ends up crashing or exiting your game, and also sort of ways people, overall expenditure. Willie Cheer did a really great article on his PAX experience in the mini booth. All of that will be up in an article as soon as I can get this recording mixed down and fix the audio levels for the wonderful background music of whatever happened in the 90s and early 2000s. Furthermore, if you guys want any more information, I'm accessible at all times. Anyone who wants to email me anything along that line, hit me up on Twitter. Direct message is perfectly fine. Actually, kind of a little bit quicker because I'll be able to get back to you faster because it'll be on my phone. But also undercog.com, which is the website for the primary game that I'm working on, will have this presentation and a full list of resources that I use. I really don't want to go over a full list of those resources because going over the list is super boring, and I substitute a PowerPoint for something with explosions, so I'm just totally not going to do that. But that being said, that is the end of what I have, short and sweet. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask.